The cold concrete walls of the prison cell seem to close in on him. The dim light flickers above, casting long shadows on the floor. A man in his late 20s, with dark eyes that have seen too much, sits hunched over on the edge of the narrow bed. His face is tired, beaten down by years of injustice, but it still carries the fire of someone who hasn't given up. Outside, the distant sound of a gavel striking echoes through the walls, a reminder of the world beyond. The courtroom verdict has been delivered again, but in here, in this cold cell, it feels like it doesn't matter anymore. The camera zooms in on the man's face, showing the weight of hopelessness and exhaustion. He stares at the cold steel bars before him, as if they could speak the truth that he has been denied for so long. Suddenly he whispers to himself, barely audible but full of raw emotion, "I didn't do it, but the world will never believe me." His voice trembles with a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. For a brief moment, the silence between his words is deafening. His eyes close, trying to block out the years of pain and frustration. There is a deep fear that the truth may never come to light. Fear that he will die in here, forgotten by the world. The night air is cool, the quiet of the street broken only by the sound of footsteps. A black man in his late 20s, wearing a worn-out jacket and carrying a small bag, walks home after a long day at work. His steps are slow but steady, his mind lost in thought about the day's events, the routine he's come to accept. The street is empty, save for a few streetlights casting long shadows along the sidewalk. It's peaceful, almost serene, a sharp contrast to what's about to unfold. As he walks, he passes a woman in her early 30s, walking briskly in the opposite direction. She glances at him briefly. Then, suddenly, her eyes widen, and she gasps. That's him!" she screams, pointing directly at him. The words hit him like a thunderclap, and he freezes in his tracks. The woman's finger shakes as she continues to shout, "He's the one! He did it!" Before he can even process what's happening, a car pulls up from behind. 2 police officers rush out and grab him by the arms, pulling him away from the sidewalk. His heart races as his mind scrambles for an explanation, but nothing makes sense. "I didn't do it," he says, his voice trembling with confusion. "I didn't do anything. Please, I didn't do it." The officers ignore his pleas. They shove him against the car, the cold metal pressing into his chest as they slap handcuffs around his wrists. His mind is spinning, trying to make sense of it all. Why? Why is this happening to him? He's innocent, but they don't believe him. The woman's voice is still ringing in his ears, accusing him with certainty, her words searing into his soul. "He's the one! Arrest him!" "No, please," he shouts, trying to fight back, but the grip of the officers tightens. His breath catches in his throat as panic rises. The woman never even looked back. She just walked away, leaving him with no chance to explain. The police force him into the back of the car, the doors slamming shut with a finality that echoes in his chest. He sits there, handcuffed, a growing sense of dread filling his mind. His body shakes, not from the cold, but from the realization that his life is about to change forever. As the car drives off, he repeats to himself over and over, almost in disbelief, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." The courtroom is packed. The heavy wooden doors creak as they close, sealing the fate of the man standing at the center. The air feels thick, as if it knows something terrible is about to happen. The man in his late 20s stands before the judge, his hands trembling as they rest on the edge of the table. His eyes are heavy with exhaustion, but they still burn with the desperate hope that somehow someone will see the truth. He glances at his family in the audience, their faces full of worry and confusion. His mother's eyes are red from crying. His father's hands are clenched in fists, as if holding on to the last shred of hope. On the opposite side, the prosecutor stands tall, charismatic, confident, and cold. He wears a smile that doesn't reach his eyes as he addresses the jury. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's playing a game, one where the truth doesn't matter, only his win does. With a loud voice, he calls out, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence is clear." The defendant, a black man, was found near the scene of the crime. His presence alone, along with his criminal background, shows that he is guilty. The words sting like a slap to the face. The man doesn't have a criminal record. He wasn't even near the crime scene. But the prosecutor doesn't care. He knows that by using the man's race, he can manipulate the case. He doesn't need evidence. The jury will be swayed by the suggestion of a black man as a threat. The man stands there, his heart racing as the prosecutor continues his attack. The community is better off without someone like him on the streets. It's simple, really. He's the one who did it, and we all know it. The man's head spins. His hands are shaking as he tries to stay composed, but the words stab into him like knives. There's no proof, no real evidence. But somehow the prosecutor's words carry weight. The man's race has already sealed his fate in the eyes of the courtroom. The judge, a stoic figure, listens with an air of indifference. His face is unreadable, his eyes scanning the papers in front of him. The man's lawyer tries to speak, but his voice is drowned out by the weight of the prosecutor's accusations. The judge looks up, his gaze cold and distant. The jury has reached a verdict. The man's breath catches in his throat. He turns to his family, his eyes wide with fear, but they're just as lost as he is. His mother presses her hand to her mouth, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. The judge raises his gavel, and the sound of it striking the wood echoes throughout the room like a death sentence. Guilty. The word hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. Time seems to slow as the man's knees buckle. His heart sinks into his stomach. This can't be happening. He never had a chance. The world has already made its decision. He's been convicted. His life is shattered, and the truth doesn't matter. He's led away, his hands cuffed behind his back, as the courtroom bursts into a hushed chaos. His family is left in stunned silence. His mother's cries pierce the room, but the man's eyes are numb. As he's escorted out of the courtroom, he turns to look at his family one last time. His father's eyes meet his. There's no anger in them, just sadness, pure, deep sadness. The door slams shut behind him. And just like that, he is gone. His life, his future, stolen in the blink of an eye. The prison is everything the man imagined, and then some. The moment the gates close behind him, it's as if the world he once knew has vanished. The heavy clang of steel echoes through the halls, and the air is thick with a mixture of sweat, fear, and despair. The walls are cold, gray, and uninviting. Each step he takes echoes in the empty space, reminding him that this is now his reality. His cell is small, barely enough room for him to move around. The concrete floor is cold against his feet, and the bare light bulb above casts a dim, flickering glow. The walls feel like they're closing in on him, their rough surfaces only adding to the suffocating feeling that has already begun to creep into his chest. The camera pans over the stark, sterile room, his small cot, the single window with a view of nothing but a blank gray sky. He stares at the window, feeling like the world outside is a distant memory, something out of reach. His life, his freedom, feels like a dream that's slowly slipping away. As the days pass, the harsh reality of prison sets in. Inmates move through the halls like ghosts, their faces hard and unforgiving. The man learns quickly that he must fight to survive. Here, no one cares about his innocence. No one cares about the truth. In this place, only strength and survival matter. One day, as he walks through the yard, an older inmate steps in front of him. The man is bigger, stronger, with eyes that look like they've seen more violence than anyone should. He doesn't speak, but the threat is clear. The tension in the air is thick, and the man can feel his pulse racing. Before he can react, the older inmate shoves him hard against the wall. The man stumbles, hitting the concrete with a sharp thud. His body aches, but he doesn't have time to think about it. He pushes himself up, standing tall, even though fear is gnawing at his insides. "I didn't do it," he mutters, but the words feel hollow in the face of this new brutality. The inmate sneers, shoving him again. Nobody cares. And just like that, the man learns that in prison, his innocence doesn't matter. No one is listening. No one is going to help him. His world is nothing more than survival, and every day is a battle to hold on to whatever sense of self he has left. Later that night, the man sits alone in his cell, the silence of the prison pressing down on him. He's bruised, both physically and emotionally, and the weight of it all is unbearable. But despite the pain, he knows one thing. He will never stop fighting. He will never give up. He pulls out a piece of paper from his pocket, the edges worn from being folded over and over again. It's a letter to his family, a letter he writes almost every day. His hand shakes as he writes the words, but his resolve is strong. "I know it's hard, but I'm still here. I haven't given up. I will never stop fighting. I will prove my innocence. I'll make them hear me. Please, don't forget me." He folds the letter carefully, his heart aching as he thinks of his family. He imagines their faces, their pain, and the hope they still carry. He holds on to that hope, even when it feels like the world is fading away. The truth may be buried for now, but he won't let it stay buried forever. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and the violence of prison continues. He's beaten, humiliated, and broken. But through it all, something inside him remains unbroken. A flicker of hope, however small, keeps him going. He dreams of a day when he will walk out of this place, his name cleared, his life returned to him. The emotional toll is immense. There are nights when he lies awake, staring at the cold concrete ceiling, wondering if he will ever see the outside world again. But then he thinks of his family, of the promise he made to them, and that's what keeps him going. Through the pain and the brutality, one thing becomes clear. The man will survive. He will fight, not just for himself, but for the truth that has been stolen from him. And no matter how hard prison tries to break him, he refuses to be forgotten. The days in prison are endless, each one blending into the next with no escape in sight. But one morning, something unexpected happens. The heavy metal door to the man's cell creaks open, and a guard tosses a letter inside. It lands on the cold concrete floor, a small piece of paper that catches the man's eye. His heart skips a beat as he walks over to it, his hands trembling. Who would be sending him a letter in this place? He picks it up, his fingers brushing against the envelope. It's rough and simple, no return address, no name. But as he opens it, his eyes scan the few words written inside. The handwriting is hurried, almost frantic. The truth is out there. You're not guilty. Fight for it. The words hit him like a surge of electricity. For a moment, the world around him disappears. His mind races as he tries to make sense of the cryptic message. Could this be real? Could someone actually believe in him? Someone who knows the truth? He reads the letter over and over again, the words sinking in deeper with each pass. He's not guilty. The truth is still out there. There's hope, a small spark of light in the darkness of his prison cell. His breath catches in his throat. The letter doesn't explain much, but it's enough to reignite the fire inside him. He's not crazy. He isn't imagining things. There's something he's missed. He was wrongfully convicted, and someone else knows it. Someone out there wants him to fight, and fight he will. That night, under the dim light of his cell, the man begins his quest for justice. He digs through the small pile of court documents he's managed to acquire over the months. They're scattered across the floor, yellowed and faded, their pages filled with legal jargon and references he can barely understand. But he's desperate. He needs to find something, anything that can prove his innocence. With each page he turns, his heart beats faster. The details are hazy, but something is off. He starts to notice inconsistencies, witness statements that don't line up, dates that don't match, and details that have been overlooked. His fingers shake as he connects the dots in his mind, each piece of the puzzle fitting together like a faint outline of the truth. He spends hours, day after day, piecing the information together. He's like a detective in his own case, retracing the steps of the night he was arrested. He compares timelines, checks every single detail, and revisits the evidence that had been presented against him. Slowly, the fog begins to clear, and he starts to see a clearer picture. But every time he thinks he's onto something, the system pushes back. The guards notice him spending more time with his documents, his eyes scanning them constantly. They grow suspicious, and before long, they begin to watch him closely. He can feel their eyes on him when he's in the yard, the cold stares of the guards following his every move. Then, one day, as he's reading through some new evidence he's uncovered, a guard approaches him. The man looks up, trying to hide the papers, but it's too late. "What's this you're reading?" the guard asks, his voice gruff and low. The man hesitates for a moment, then says, "Just some legal stuff, trying to understand what happened." The guard snorts. "You think you're going to change things in here? Forget it. The system's got you locked down. Don't go digging into things that aren't your business." The man's heart races, but he holds his ground. "I'm not giving up." The guard smirks before walking away, but the message is clear. The prison system doesn't want him to find the truth. They don't want him to uncover anything that could change his fate. That night, as he lies on his cot, his mind races. The more he uncovers, the more danger he feels he's in. The deeper he digs, the more threats he faces. But despite the fear creeping into his chest, he can't stop. The truth is out there, and he has to find it. His innocence depends on it. A few days later, the man receives a warning from one of the inmates. "You better stop messing with those papers. You keep this up, and you're gonna end up in a worse spot than you already are." The words are chilling, but the man doesn't back down. He's come too far to stop now. He knows the risks, but his mind is made up. He's fighting for his freedom. He's fighting for justice. And nothing, not even the prison system or the threats of other inmates, can stop him now. The man sits in the corner of his small cell, his eyes glued to the documents spread out before him. The pages tremble in his hands as he carefully inspects the evidence. He's found it. The proof of his innocence is right here in front of him. A single document, a single detail that had been overlooked in his original trial. The truth is within his grasp. The pieces of the puzzle are finally coming together. The camera zooms in on the document. It's a piece of overlooked evidence from the night of the crime, showing that the police had mistakenly identified him. His heart pounds as he reads the words again. He can feel the weight of it. This is it. This is the breakthrough he's been fighting for all this time. He begins to scribble a note to his lawyer, his hands shaking with excitement. He's going to prove his innocence. He's going to change everything. The world will finally see the truth, and he will be free. Just as he's about to finish the letter, the door to his cell suddenly bursts open. The sharp clang of metal on metal echoes through the quiet room, and the man looks up, startled. The guard stands in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," the guard says, his voice cold and emotionless. The man's heart sinks. He knows something's wrong. He doesn't even have time to react before the guard grabs his arm, pulling him out of the cell. The documents, the evidence, are left behind on the floor, forgotten for the moment. His hands are still shaking as he's dragged down the cold, narrow halls. "Why? What's happening?" the man asks, his voice filled with panic. But the guard doesn't respond. He just keeps pulling him along through the maze of prison corridors. Every step feels like a step further away from the truth. The man's mind races. Is this the end of his fight for justice? Has the system caught up with him, shutting down everything he's uncovered? The guard leads him to a small, isolated room, solitary confinement. The door slams shut behind him with an overwhelming finality. He's alone again, trapped in the suffocating silence of the cell. The man stumbles backward, his body heavy with the weight of what just happened. He falls to his knees, his chest tightening with fear and frustration. He tries to steady his breathing, but his mind is spinning. He was so close. The truth was right there in front of him. But now, Now it's all gone. His eyes flick to the small window above him, but it doesn't offer any answers. His hands shake uncontrollably as he slams his fist against the cold concrete floor. "I was so close," he mutters, the words barely escaping his lips. "I was so close to being free." He wants to scream, but nothing comes out. The helplessness he's been fighting against comes rushing back stronger than ever. The truth is within reach, but the system won't let him escape. The seconds stretch into what feels like hours. He sits in the darkness, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger and confusion. Is this really how it ends? Will the truth ever see the light of day? Or has the system finally won? The door to the solitary cell remains closed, and the silence is deafening. The man clenches his fists, swearing to himself. He won't give up. He can't. The truth is too close, and he'll fight for it, no matter the cost. But in this moment, trapped in isolation, with no way of knowing what comes next, the cliffhanger of his fate hangs in the air. Will he ever get out? Will the truth come to light? Or will he be silenced forever? After years of relentless struggle, the moment of truth finally arrives. The man stands in front of the judge, a mix of exhaustion and determination on his face. The years of torment and isolation in prison have taken their toll, but his resolve is unwavering. He's not the same man who was first locked away. The world outside has moved on, but for him it's all been a fight for justice, for his freedom. The courtroom is tense. The air feels thick with anticipation. His lawyer, a determined woman who has fought beside him every step of the way, stands next to him. Across from them, the prosecutor sits, his usual confidence replaced by a subtle unease. He knows what's coming. He knows the truth is about to be exposed. The man's family is in the audience, sitting together, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. It's been so long since they've seen him free, since they've seen him as the person they once knew, before he was taken away from them. Their faces are a blend of relief and disbelief as they wait for what is to come. The judge calls the proceedings to order, and the courtroom falls silent. The prosecutor stands, ready to present his case as he has done countless times before. But this time, things are different. This time, the truth has already been uncovered. The man's lawyer steps forward and presents the new evidence, the evidence that proves the man's innocence beyond a shadow of a doubt. With a steady hand, the lawyer reads out the key facts: the false identification, the overlooked alibi, the failure of the original case to connect the man to the crime. The prosecutor's face falls as each piece of evidence is laid bare. He knows there's nothing he can do. The truth is undeniable. And then, in a stunning moment of defeat, the prosecutor is forced to admit it. Your Honor, the defendant is innocent. The words hang in the air, impossible to ignore. A wave of relief washes over the courtroom, but it's bittersweet. The man's life has been destroyed, and no admission of guilt can undo the years he has lost. The judge looks at the man, his eyes filled with a mix of respect and regret. Mr. Name, I'm sorry for what you've been through. The court recognizes the error, and you are hereby cleared of all charges. It's official. The truth has come to light. The man stands there, his body shaking with a mixture of disbelief and relief. The weight of the years he spent behind bars is finally lifting, but the joy of freedom is bittersweet. It doesn't feel like the victory he imagined. The years lost, the family torn apart, the memories erased. They can't be brought back. His eyes scan the courtroom, and there, in the front row, he sees them. His family. His mother, father, and sister are there, their faces streaked with tears. They have waited so long for this moment. They have suffered with him, but now, as the truth is revealed, they are free from the burden of doubt and fear. His mother stands, her hand trembling as she reaches for him. In that instant, their eyes meet, and the floodgates open. She rushes toward him, pulling him into an embrace that feels like salvation. His father joins them, his hand on his son's shoulder. They hold each other for a long moment, the years of separation melting away. But even as the tears fall, the man can't help but feel the ache of all the lost time. His mind drifts back to the years spent in the cold, dark prison cell, the friends he'll never see again, the opportunities stolen from him, the time he could never get back. The courtroom, once so full of tension, is now filled with the sound of tears and soft sobs. Some are tears of joy, some of sorrow, but all of them are a testament to the long road of pain and suffering this man has endured. As the judge dismisses the case, the man turns to face the lawyer who made all of this possible. She smiles at him, her work finally complete. He nods, his gratitude evident in his tired eyes. She saved him, but the truth she uncovered came too late to heal the wounds time had left behind. As the man exits the courtroom with his family, the bright sunlight outside feels overwhelming. It's a new day, but it's hard to know what to feel. The world has moved on, but for him, the battle isn't over. The scars of wrongful imprisonment will remain, and healing will take time. The man stands alone in the same courtroom where his life was once shattered. The walls feel different now, less imposing, less cold, but the memories are still fresh. He runs his fingers over the worn wood of the bench, his eyes tracing the lines that have witnessed so many lives changed, so many destinies sealed with a single gavel strike. He looks around the room, his mind replaying the scenes of the trial. The prosecutor, the judge, his family in the back, their faces filled with hope and fear. All those years of torment and confusion, of fighting for something that felt impossible. He's free now, but the weight of it all still lingers in his chest. He takes a deep breath, his heart heavy. Freedom isn't what he imagined it would be. It's not just the absence of bars or the end of shackles. It's the feeling of emptiness that comes with knowing how many others are still trapped. How many other innocent people are suffering the same fate he did. How many lives are still being stolen by the same system that failed him. The courtroom is silent. He looks up, his eyes meeting the empty chair where he once sat, condemned by a lie. He knows that this room, this building, holds so many stories of injustice. His is just one. But how many others are there? How many lives have been lost in the same way? How many people like him have been buried behind bars for crimes they didn't commit? The camera zooms out slowly and a quiet voiceover speaks his thoughts. How many others are still behind bars for crimes they didn't commit? The screen goes black for a moment, and then, in bold letters, the message appears. Injustice doesn't end with one person's freedom. We must continue the fight for truth and justice for those who are still waiting for their day in court. The screen fades to black again, and the haunting silence fills the room. The man's reflection is now the audience's. He's no longer just the protagonist, but a symbol for the countless others who continue to fight for their own truth to be heard. His journey has ended, but the battle is far from over. As the credits roll, the weight of the story lingers. The audience is left to ponder. How many innocent lives have been taken by a broken system? How much longer will injustice continue to thrive?